Okay, hello everyone. So we are meeting today to discuss a really interesting topic. It's biometrics and the influence on us, the society, as well as how the technology is used for good. Um, the growing adoption of biometric technology. And we have a great panel today. I just want to quickly introduce everyone, including myself. As short as it is, I just want you to know my background is computer science IT. I have worked in many industries, and around 2005, I've decided that privacy is what I'm interested in, and from there, I just continued on with my career. Also, being a university lecturer and creating courses and teaching students. Our panel, so I'm going to start with Vincenzo. Vincenzo is a digital policy advisor, a partner at Panetta and Associates law firm, and also a colleague and adjunct professor at IP and data protection at the IULM University in Milan, and a journalist. He works in the domain of privacy and data protection, intellectual property, communications, and social media. And his skills, as you will see, his skills range from law to communication and new technologies, and focus on the intersection of these two areas.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, thank you for joining. And we have Ed, and Ed is a fantastic enthusiast in all things GDPR and technology. He's worked for over 40 years in IT, of which 20 years in IT security. He is currently helping organizations to improve in these areas, as well as in the training for privacy and security. And he has a particular interest in GDPR that he has demonstrated to me because he can recite all the articles, of which I'm very jealous. Welcome. Then we have Phuc Hua, and I hope I say the name right. And he is the Chief Quality Officer at Northwave. He is responsible for information security, quality, continuity, and privacy, which are all areas of my interest. And I also teach on that. So he has been a management consultant at PwC. Hello, colleague, former colleague.
Hi.
And he likes to help things, to make things simple and programmatic, which I absolutely love. And I am very thrilled to have him on our panel.
And thank you. Nice to be
here. He also has a great smile. That helps.
Thank you.
And I will go to Arthur. Arthur is, I will leave the best for last. Arthur has a great set of skills. He is an independent security advisor from Netherlands. Has over 20 years experience in the field of information and cybersecurity. He comes from a technology background, backed by studying electrical engineering, so very, very close to my background. Because of his expertise in both technical and non-technical fields, Arthur is capable of balancing these two. And I have to be honest, he provides a fantastic overview with such simplicity and ease for all of us to understand. But the last and the best is that he's also an ethical hacker, which I was very pleased to find out. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Amalia. Nice to be here.
Last but not least, we have Tariq, who is very quiet but incredibly intelligent. He is a cybersecurity consultant and PCB trainer. He's the head of information security governance practice at Complio Tech, a small IT company that offers advisory services in France. Tariq's experience is related to information security management, ISMS audit, and implementation, including reviews of risk maturity, which is also a great area. So absolutely powerhouse here. I think we can get started. I'm going to switch over to the presentation. Hopefully I didn't take too much time. All right, so let's ask ourselves this. Do we actually know what all the bioidentifiers are? And our attendees will see that we've listed exhaustively, hopefully, all of them. We know mostly about fingerprints and facial recognition because they've been in the news a lot, and we've been part of that with using our technologies. Some of us have been using their retinal scans for airport security. Some of us have used voice recognition for authentication. But we also, and one of the panelists mentioned to me, digital signatures, and it did not occur to me, but they are a bioidentifier. The most important thing is the last 2 points. They're unique to each one of us, and they are actually part of us, which makes this a very interesting topic today. So I would like to get our panelists to start talking a little bit about how comfortable do we think the general public is with the technology? And to frame it, I think I'd like to start with Vincenzo and Ed, just to give us a little bit of the view of the continents. How do you find on the two continents, the European and the American continent, that people feel about biometrics?
I start then. Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. So we have to say that, of course, we need to first say that it depends on what kind of biometric data we're talking about, what kind of technology, and for which purpose. For example, if you are looking at the one you mentioned before, so facial recognition, we can use it when we unlock our phones, our tablets, or our PC, or when we go to the airport for border security. It really depends, and sometimes it's also used by law enforcement authorities to ensure security. But it really depends because it can be used for verification purposes or identification purposes, for example. And in that case, also the sentiments of people relating to the use of the adoption of this technology changes. So, for example, for verification purposes, so the use of when we go to the airport, when we match at the border, we match the photo of the picture of us in our passport and the photo that the system takes of us to verify if actually it's us. And then on that, people don't feel quite comfortable. Also because normally, if everything goes right, this kind of pictures shouldn't be stored on a database, so should be erased in a second, let's say. In other cases, so for identification purposes, so where so a picture of us is matched in a database and compared to many other pictures, or in another case with a live facial recognition, so where there is no match between pictures, but between a picture of us taken in, I don't know, perhaps outside, so with no control, no light condition, where we can't actually control, the kind of light and the quality of the picture. And then in that case, of course, it's a different story. So we have some percentage presented in a report of the Fundamental Rights Agency, a European agency, that says that in the US, for example, the 56% of people trust the use of facial recognition technology by law enforcement authorities. That's quite impressive, honestly. I don't think we have the same percentage in Europe. But this percentage lowers to 36% when this technology is used by companies and 18% when used by advertisers. Just to compare with the EU, in the UK only EU UK is in Europe, let's say, not European Union.
For another 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit longer, but still.
Yeah, it says that only 9% of people feel completely comfortable. I feel completely uncomfortable when facial recognition is used. So it really depends on the kind of use and the purpose.
If I may add, I think it's also depending on how intrusive the technology feels. For instance, a photo of your face, and we are getting used to facial recognition only because of our smartphone use, obviously. But if you have to put your eye in a sort of camera, to look into a camera for your iris recognition or your retinal scan, that feels at least a little bit more intrusive. So people, in my experience, are a little bit more apprehensive the more intrusive the technology gets. So using fingerprints and using facial recognition is more or less common nowadays, and it feels not so intrusive anymore. But other things could still feel also very personal or very in your personal sphere if they use technology like that.
Agreed. So much so that a lot of the US states have enacted and are in the process of enacting biometric laws. So that tells us something about, well, not the fact that there's a difference between the continents in the way they've legislated privacy, but the fact that legislators or regulators are finding it appropriate to put rules around the use of biometrics.
Yeah, and I think Vincenzo raises an interesting point as well. If you use your face for unlocking your phone, I think that's a no-brainer for everybody. But if they start using your face to track you through a city or see where you are shopping or other things, then the same technology with a different purpose is getting more and more intrusive as well. So I think the more you have that non-consensual use of that technology, the less comfortable people are with that stuff.
Yeah, let me add to that, Arthur. I think there's a lot of, well, there's a lack of knowledge with the general public. People don't have an idea that they are being tracked, that biometrics are being used. For instance, many people don't realize that you're being tracked through an airport by the use of cameras and facial recognition and probably other means as well. The same is true, for instance, for your supermarket, where they know exactly what you're buying, when you're buying it, and how often you visit a supermarket and even a chain if necessary. Whether people would object to that if they knew what's going on is something, I think, entirely different. The same thing with what's happening in public spaces. For instance, with those billboards, the most modern billboards have a camera built in, where they can sense your reaction to certain pictures shown to you. Well, that's another way of tracking. You could go a bit further and use that for facial recognition. It's all a matter of, well, what are you willing to use, and is there any regulation to curb this?
Yeah, and I think in some situations people don't have an opt-out option as well.
No.
But I guess it's also depending on culture. Culture, I guess. Oh?
Yeah.
But I guess it's also dependent on culture, because if you look at the Asian continent, where we haven't talked about, paying in the supermarket by facial recognition is almost, especially in the COVID period, is a very normal thing, because then you don't have to touch anything. And and China will be a discussion later on the laws there, but you also see that the emphasis that we put on individual privacy and on not being tracked. I agree with Ed that probably we don't really know what the consequences are On the other hand, you see in different cultures with different backgrounds, there's also a different emphasis on what is privacy and how to use biometrics and what's acceptable or not.
Yeah, agree.
It also has to do with different political situations in certain countries. What's possible in China would, well, probably trigger a revolution in Europe.
I think we're expecting our poll question shortly. I'm not sure exactly when, but I don't want to interrupt. This was a very good start because I wanted to give Tariq an opportunity to tell us about a couple of cases, but we'll let the poll go first.
There's no right or wrong answer, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personal preference.
I was looking at it.
Well, there are some interesting legal stuff related to if you have to unlock your phone with a PIN code or a biometric. I know
We're going to
there are
discuss
some
it later, you know, with the results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
We're back again.
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
So let's
56:44.
Okay.
It's different from what I expected.
Yeah.
Me too.
Okay, so let's go to, let me just make the PowerPoint back to the pretty mode again, if I can get to that button. All right, just a second. All right, here we go. So I wanted to ask Tariq to take us through the examples that he has been mentioning. Just so we, of course we know, but biometrics, the reason why we got to this point is because somebody thought it's a good idea and it's got some good for the society. So let's find out what examples we have.
I think that just to go back to the initial question, I think that we feel less comfortable with biometrics and gathering information, personal information, when it's the government who's doing it. And this is exactly the first example, because in France, in 1974, the French government wanted to set up a unique and a common file that contains personal data. So this file was supposed to be shared with all the administrations, and then people were not that much comfortable with this. So this was the first time that a law was established in France in order to regulate and to be sure that personal information is processed as people want. And I think that the second example, because I've been thinking of the governments, but the second one is about the companies and business in general, because I think that we feel more comfortable when we have something to win with this, because nowadays we see that we are able to schedule appointments at the doctors without going to the doctor's office. We can do our financial transactions. So somewhere we have this evolution of technology that leads people to pick a choice and to choose whether they want to have biometrics or maybe some other way to authenticate to these online services. And in general, these two examples say that maybe there was something in the people's perceptions upon time, because now I think that we are more comfortable of using this information when we have something to win. And when we talk about the evolution of technology, there is something important, I think, which is the cloud computing. So because today with our device, we can be connected to some place else other than the device, because personal data or data in general may be stored somewhere else. And I was thinking about biometrics because all of these things bring us to one point that there is a need to have regulations and law in order to ensure that this information is processed as we want.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, guys, maybe we could talk about the GDPR and the regulations.
Ta-da-da-da.
There it is. The big elephant in
There
the
we
room.
go.
Yeah.
So yeah, we should jump in and
Yeah. If you look at the GDPR, I think that worldwide, the GDPR at this moment is the gold standard of privacy law. I haven't seen any privacy law yet that comes close to, well, ensuring your personal data rights that you should have. At least in Europe, we believe you should have. It's obviously totally different in other countries, especially in the US, where we have seen, well, was it last July that the agreement between the European Union and the US was revoked,
yes.
simply because the European Union
Revoked again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again for the second
Strike
time.
This
two.
time with consequences.
This
Yeah.
time it was the privacy shield. Not much of a shield. The European Court of Justice decided. So there we go. I've recently, as I said, I got the Chinese version of the GDPR. Well, which is fun, but it's not a GDPR. It doesn't even come close. You know, there's so many restrictions that, well, you can't take it seriously. The other thing is that if you look at biometrics, are they medical information? I don't believe so. I believe that, or it's stated in Article 9 of the GDPR and in Article 4. For instance, Article 4, biometric data means personal data resulting from specific technical processing relating to the physical, physiological, and behavioral characteristics of a natural person. Well, there you go. It's tied to us, as we said in the previous slide.
But Ed, if as you recall, we were extrapolating this a little bit, and I think Arthur said, yeah, but what if somebody's starting to read something from our biometrics and turns it into medical information?
Exactly. Yeah, an example would be if you have a retinal scanner, some diseases that you suffer from can be, well, they have their impact on how your retina looks as well. So facial recognition, you might even see some, if you look close enough, there might even be some things you can read from somebody's face as well. So there is a lot of information, or more information than just your identification, really, to be read from biometrics. And the more intrusive the biometric verification is, I think the more you could be able to collect also medical data, or at least some status of how healthy or unhealthy a person is, really. How
Yes,
does the GDPR
absolutely
protect us from abusing that potential, really?
Well, you can't. As soon as I see your face, and if I get it up close, we can and I scan your retina. I'm not a medical expert, but if that would be possible to conclude any medical information from that, well, obviously you're even more protected by the GDPR. What it does in other countries, I'm not really aware of. I mean, if it is used commercially for instance, in the US, or if you're singled out by a government institution for having a certain, or maybe having a certain disease, I don't know.
Yeah.
The only thing I know is that the GDPR will protect you in that case.
If I can jump in just to give some overview for the ones that are not so confident and familiar with the GDPR. So it's important to remember that personal data the processing of personal data normally relates on 6 possible legal bases under Article 6. But when we talk about special categories of data, of personal data, like biometric data, health data, data concerning political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, and so on, then Article 9 said that normally this kind of data should be prohibited. Processing of this data should be prohibited, except, of course, there are exceptions. So consent is an exception. It is a strong exception. It means that you can't use biometrical data for legitimate interest. So for, let's say, the commercial purpose of the company. For what concerns biometrical data. So, and the last paragraph, Article 9, said that also member states may maintain or introduce further conditions, including limitations with regard to processing of biometric data. That means that normally these kind of data are very, as considered very important. So every processing of this data should be done with safeguards, with in a very responsible way, let's say. And yeah.
So I want to give Fuqua a little because he's smiling. He's smiling for some time.
Yeah. Now, this I do notice if you talk about the EU or Europe with the GDPR, or US, and look at China, they have very different regimes on protecting personal data. They have different ideas. Their basis is different. Their motivation is also different. So I also looked at the Chinese data privacy law, and if you look at the private entities or private companies part, it gets closer to the GDPR than the US regime. But what it does do is that it makes an exception for the authorities. That means they have strict rules, but when it comes to the government, then it's like a free-for-all.
Yeah.
That's my problem that I have with the Chinese version of the GDPR. It's, you know, everything can be overruled by the government.
And this is what Tariq was saying, right? So when in France, at first, when it was more control from the government, of course, the level of trust was lower, right? But and I think that's what we're seeing. It's so interesting. What we're seeing in the US, it's like, how can we monetize every single possible action that a person takes? Whereas in the Asian countries is how can we control every single possible action that a person takes? And Europe is in the middle, which is fantastic. And we haven't talked about Canada yet, but we are in the process of modernizing our laws. So Ed, don't hold your breath. We might come up with a better GDPR.
GDPR 2.0.
Yeah, what's Canada?
And what I was wondering about, and I would like to throw that out there for the panel as well. We are going through some turbulent times, obviously, but people have posted their face, selfies, whatever, on all kinds of social media. So facial recognition is not that hard anymore. You can collect a lot of data. So what if they use those kind of biometrics to identify you if you have been protesting or doing something wrong or walk the red light or whatever, if they are going to use those facial features you have to recognize you for doing other things,
well, there are even companies that are commercially working with that, like
exactly
companies like Clearview.
Clearview.
You can,
Yeah, Clearview.
well, you pay for it and you can get any picture and they match it with almost any person in the world.
Yeah.
Um,
So the technology is there.
The technology is there. The technology is improving step by step, but very rapidly. It's not walking; it's running. And maybe we have to regulate that a bit. Obviously, China is very far with that technology and implementing it and using it. I definitely hope we don't get a social credit score like they seem to use there. You know,
Well,
like
including facial recognition with a mask, I think.
Yeah.
That is being happening. So the technology is improving, it's working. We don't always know if it's going in the right direction. But it's definitely taking over the intents of the law and the protection. So I think that's one of the points we wanted to talk about. Incidentally, I was going through Twitter yesterday, and there is an artist that is creating face masks, but they're personalized. So the artist is painting your face, the other half of your face, on the mask, so you look exactly like you.
Yeah,
but
you can here in Europe you can buy those with your own picture.
There you go, like on the cake.
Yeah, it's
like on the cake, exactly.
And what you see here is definitely that technology is leading the way, and the regulations are, well, hopelessly behind. And that
would be
the regulation is what's protecting us as an individual. And technology is, it's nice for those nerds that want to dig into it. And there's always somebody
to
that
that
will
point,
find.
I want to go back to Arthur and Tariq, and I want them to go a little bit more under the hood of the technology. So how can the technology be used to protect us?
My take on it is currently that a lot of the biometrics are done on an endpoint device. Say if you log in with Windows Hello, your face is recognized on your laptop. Your mobile phone does it yourself. So it's all it's all done in at the end user device, if that's the better word for it. But it's all doing assumptions on your facial recognition. I've seen cases for the iPhone facial recognition where a maternal twin could unlock the phone of his sister or her sister or his brother. So the technology has some limitations as well. And I would like to link back to what Ed said, that you can have your face printed on a mask. So for instance, I have a picture of Ed, I print it on a mask, but I make it a full facial mask and then I put that mask on. It's amazing how far you can get with a fake mask as well. So technology is going very rapidly, but to have that speed, it always cuts corners, and those corners are always the edge cases where hackers come in, or where you have a very big problem to convince the police that it wasn't you at that scene, that crime scene, but it was somebody else wearing your mask. So technology, on one hand, is offering a lot of opportunities, especially in the mobile sphere, but it also has its limitations that we need to be very aware of. In my experience as somebody who tries to break things to see how secure they are.
So how good are we as a society, and Vincenzo, you as well, please comment, to actually inform people of the Yeah, what are the bad things that can happen, or just even give them the notice, this is happening to you. This is like we were talking about airports, right? You go through security and you have no idea what's being taken from you and where it goes.
Yeah, first of all, it's important to remind that we have rights, thanks, at least in Europe. I mean, on one side, it's important that to remind that in the US, several cities like San Francisco, which is the heart of Silicon Valley, banned the use of facial recognition several months ago. That's not happening in Europe, perhaps because we are waiting for a new piece of legislation related to AI. So everything is under discussion at the moment. Well, on the other side, of course, we have already the GDPR. Even in the use when this kind of technology is used by law enforcement authorities, we still have rights. So for the one that are not familiar, besides the GDPR, which is the regulation 679 of 2017, we also have a directive, directive 680. 2017, 16, sorry, that said basically that when, of course, law enforcement authorities don't have to, are not companies, so are not normal controllers, but on the other side, they have to provide data subjects, so people with information relating to a contact. So who as a person can I contact to know whether there are some of my personal data have been stored or processed, about purpose. So even when I go through a security scan, there should be a sign, a warning that says to me, okay, this technology is used for purposes 1, 2, 3, and your data will be stored for 1 day, 1 hour, 1 second, and so on. And it's important to understand that also law enforcement authorities should provide information about the right to lodge a complaint with the supervisor authority. So we can challenge some choices of law enforcement authorities and companies in general, of course. The European Data Protection Supervisor, for example, last summer, published a consultation saying that, for example, even if a bank decides to give access only, for general public only through facial recognition, let's say just for clients, it's crucial that there is an alternative. So because of course we are not talking about massive security measures like could be, I don't know, the data centers of Google, where you need, passports, ID, perhaps retina scanning, and so on. We are talking about normal implementation of technology. So it's important to understand that it's not a choice that we have to we don't have to stick with it. It's not mandatory. We have rights, and it's important to. We have the supervisor authority, data protection authority, and so we still have choice. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So,
okay, but
sorry.
yeah, but
you had a comment.
that applies to Europe, and
Yeah.
I'm not aware that it applies anywhere else. Well, if you look at the presentation, what about Apple, Google, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and so on? Well, we don't know exactly what they're doing and when they're doing things. We know that they are, well, collecting our information through cookies and other means. They follow our search patterns. They follow our which websites we go to. Maybe even they track where we go. But it's not only Apple, Google, and Facebook. It's so many more devices and applications that collect things nowadays,
Right. So
including your car.
yeah.
And some are for the good, but some of them can be used against you.
So have you guys ever wondered when you are talking to your spouse about something in the kitchen and all of a sudden your phone starts sending you an advertisement about exactly that topic? And it's not like you're talking about groceries. Like say, for example, you're talking about I don't know, does ibuprofen or paracetamol interfere with another drug? And all of a sudden you get some advertisements, right? So our biometrics are harvested everywhere. Every breath we take, there's a device listening.
Yeah.
Every move we make, I'll be missing you.
Maybe we should have started. We had a song theme for our
the theme song of this
creepy
presentation.
song theme.
Yeah, and what my opinion is in this is that companies, especially technology companies, they collect everything they can. They don't already have a purpose for most of the data that they collect, but they think, well, once we have it, we can do things with it that we want. So there's a very big data hunger, if I can call it like this, from especially technology companies that want to, at the end of the day, I think they want to be able to do some predictive profiling of you so that they can sell you advertisement or whatever that with the highest click rate. Because if you look at how Google and Facebook make their money, it's mainly from stuff like advertising. So the more clicks you do, the more money they make.
I guess
Their business model is based on collecting information and selling it on. So
exactly,
any piece of
we are the
information
product
that I have from you, we can. Well, they just have to find a customer for it.
Exactly.
And they're pretty damn good at it. They find.
That's why it's also free, right, Ed? That's why it's free for us, because we are the product.
Yeah, we are the product.
I think this is a field where also, if you want to bring some innovation, so use facial recognition to, as you mentioned, Ed, with this screen that look at your face, your expressions to understand if you're happy or not, and so on. It really depends on what kind of data they process. So let's say worst case, they could take a picture of you and store your picture, your location for 10 years. Worst case scenario. Good, let's say better case could be that they don't actually analyze your face. They just they really erase your face. They just check that your eyebrows are how they are, how it's your mouth if you're smiling. So there's no identification, there's no storing of location data of face, and then they just aggregate the data to understand if I don't know, the day they were promoting some stuff, people were happy or not.
But the question is,
same technology, total different approach, and it's something that data protection officers and the privacy experts should be aware of, and when they consult with their clients.
But the question for me is whether you would like to participate in that or not, and that goes to consent. And you haven't consented; they're just doing it. And whether they blur your face or not, it's still a part of you. It's your information that they're harvesting and they are using. I think that well, if they want to use it, they should ask for my permission. If I'm the product, I want to be rewarded for it because they're making money out of it and I get nothing.
So that's a very good point, but I think the other point that Vincenzo is raising is the fact that I personally don't think that there's been enough education put out there to show how this technology and how the biometrics can be used for the good in a win-win situation where the rights of the individuals are respected with the consent, and where the companies still get to harvest enough insights so they can evolve whatever business models that they need to evolve. Like, for example, I can't remember which version of the iPhone was supposed to come out where you just scroll with your eyes. Okay, well, that's great. As long as you don't, like, you do that interaction that is just for me and allows me to use the product in a way that I become loyal to it. That's great. Don't store it. Or we had a case in Canada where a mall was fined recently because you know, when you go into the mall and you have the mall directory, you see all the stores on a screen. Well, they were basically, they had a camera and they saw people's faces and they were watching them. And to me, it had absolutely no justification. I'm going to see which store I want to go to. There's no reason for you to film me. There's absolutely nothing coming out of that, not even security, because I'm looking at a list of stores, right? So I don't think there's enough education for the Apples, the Googles, the where, or maybe consultations where the regulators can go and say, hey, you can do it. This is how. And I want to say Tariq and Kanil is doing a really good job with that, because they are very out there to promote this hand holding with companies. And I've seen quite a few examples where and I think companies also have to trust that if they go to the regulator, they're not going to be penalized if they're doing something wrong, but they're going to be asked to rewind and go back and do it the right way and without penalties. So
I
at the
think you're talking
moment, I
about
think
transparency here, aren't you, Amalia? So they are collecting stuff, but if they are more transparent about it, then it's also easier for people to opt in or opt out or use it or don't use it. So that's I think one of the key issues as well, that it needs to be a little bit more transparent. What do they collect? Why do they collect it? And who will be the user of my data, really?
yeah.
At this moment, you think I think that companies are not telling you what they're doing with it, and they just try and see what they get away with. You know, as long as nobody complains, hey, obviously.
Yeah, but there's Mr. Max Schrems that's complaining a lot, and even with Apple yesterday. So that a company well known for privacy issues, the way they try to enhance privacy. So I think winter is coming, fines are coming, the grace period of the GDPR is over, and now there are no more excuses.
There are no more
I mean, we are 4 years from when the text of the GDPR was published.
Yeah.
And there are websites popping up now where you can find all the rulings from all the individual DPAs in Europe. So all the regulators, all those rulings will be published or are published, and you can find them on.
I also want to remind people that are not lawyers among the public that with the GDPR, according to Article 80, you don't need neither a lawyer. You can go to a consumer association, an association of your country that defends fundamental rights, privacy rights, and then you will be okay. So they will provide legal assistance, and that's it. So it's easier than it was in the past.
In Europe, anybody who feels that he's mistreated can give a DPA a call, and they will help him out. So you don't need any high-paid lawyers or anything else. Just give them a call, send them an email, go to their website, and they'll guide you through.
Okay,
I'm
so
sure a lot of companies don't like it.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the not the cost of innovation, because we've talked about it, but the kind of our individual rights. But to me, how do we handle data deletion or stop processing, or and like you said, Ed, if they're not even asking for consent, you know, where are these bits and pieces, bytes of us stored, and for how long, and how do we even get any kind of control over that?
Well, the thing is that depends again on which part of the world you're in. If you're talking about the US, as soon as you agree with their terms and conditions, they can store it, well, till hell freezes over.
Indefinitely.
And that might take quite a while. If you're in Europe, companies should be informing you that they have your information and in which way they collected it, for what purpose they are using it, what purpose they collected it, and how long they're going to store it. If for some reason you would like your data to be deleted, they have to oblige. So one request to that company is more than enough. The only question is, which companies have my information?
Right.
And to be honest, I don't have a clue. And so far, I check my email regularly. I haven't found an email that said, well, we have collected your information and we're using it for this purpose. So it's very, very hard. You have a right, but it's very hard to exercise that right.
And it's uncertain that you actually have exercise. You can submit the request, but you don't know what you're getting back, and you don't know if they've deleted everything about you if you said so.
But from a company's point of view, it's sometimes also very hard, because since the GDPR, if my company will get a request, could you remove all my personal data from all your data that you have? Yeah, I can do a search, but more than that, if there's a backup somewhere that contains that data, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to find it. So it's also very hard to say to someone who exercises his right to forget, how a company can do that and prove that the person is truly removed, because I can't show him what I don't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was quite debated when GDPR came out, and I was at a conference in Washington when that question was asked. So we have a question from the audience. How can we as users make sure that our biometric data is not shared with any third party? Well, to me, that's a dream. I don't think we can. But anyway,
We are not.
if you have any idea.
No, trust us, we're from Google, so that's, I think,
we share everything.
In Google,
sharing
we
is
trust.
caring. Yeah. I don't think you have, other than the promise that the owner or the retainer of that data makes, the only thing that's currently protecting you is that most biometric data is really tied to a device, your phone or your laptop or something else. But as soon as it starts moving to the cloud, I think that would be very difficult to guarantee with 100% that data is not shared or used by others for other purposes. I think that, and this is where theory and practice are a little bit diverging. The GDPR guarantees you that right, but as Ed said, how easy is it to exercise that right? So that's the move to the cloud will be a deal breaker for a lot of that biometric data sharing.
There's one real difficult point for me here, and that is that as soon as biometrics are being used within an application, and that application is linked to somewhere in the cloud, I have no idea where my data is going. And as soon as it, in my case, it's out of the EU, well, I have no idea what's going to happen with it. And I'm depending on the local law in that country. For instance, before there was some discussion about TikTok in the US, I had no idea that TikTok was a Chinese application. I don't use it, but anyway, you know, a lot of people were giving their information to, well, basically a Chinese company. And where is it being stored? Is that still in Europe? Is it within the EU? Is it in China? Is it protected by the GDPR?
Yeah.
So far, I haven't seen anybody who has answered those questions.
And don't forget, a lot of people are willingly sharing biometric data as well, because if you post a selfie or a picture of yourself and your friends on the internet, you're actually also sharing your facial biometrics with everyone else on the internet. So it's a two-edged sword, I think.
May I say that they probably don't have a clue what they're doing in terms of identity management? They're just doing it.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's part of their realm of thought when they do it. It's just nice to share pictures, to share dances with friends, and that TikTok is a platform or Facebook is a platform. They don't see the things that we see in how it can be misused, how it can be corrupted, how fraud can be actually done with the information that they put online with actually their own consent, because they actively record, actively share.
What do you think?
Biometrics, it's irreversible. So once that has been corrupted, how can we undo a part of us? I think that is the biggest
issue,
threat,
biggest problem.
Here's another question from the audience before, just so we don't, run out of time. Can we store fingerprint templates? Can the stored fingerprint templates be used by law enforcement? And if yes, for what purpose?
Well, the fingerprints that you're using on your phone are not really fingerprint templates. So that they just take a sort of digitized code that is related to the nooks and crannies of your fingerprint. So the biometric data that's on your phone, you cannot reconstruct your original fingerprint from that. The other way around should be possible. If you have a picture, you might be able to create a sort of biometric identification from it. But currently,
with fingerprints, with fingerprinting on your phone, it typically takes a number of data points of that fingerprint and stores that as a code. So it's not a picture. If you take a very high resolution picture of your fingerprint, well, in which way that can be used in a court of law or by any police, well, I'm
the other way
not
around
sure.
is more interesting. I've seen cases where people took a picture from a fingerprint from somebody on the internet and then use that in a sort of mold to use that as the fingerprint to unlock a phone. So that's the other way around, and you're using the original fingerprint really to fake biometric data. So that's an easy, and that has been done a lot of times before. So that's the other way around, but that's a very feasible attack vector, if I can call it like that.
But if it would hold up in a court of law, I'm not sure. You would have to ask a lawyer for that, and that might be a discussion. Sorry?
Do we have a lawyer present?
We have a lawyer present. But last remarks, because we're at the top of the hour. And Vincenzo, I was thinking about you because what about the fingerprints that are on file with the government to issue you your passport, and you know you go through airport security, and then they're also shared with the local enforcement?
I mean, it's not so. I mean, and then in Europe, of course, US and Europe work in a very different way. There is Europol, and so there is, of course, a network of local enforcement authorities that communicate each other. But as I said, there are, of course, boundaries and limitations, and the respect of fundamental rights is still there. We have the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, and says that every limitation of fundamental rights like privacy needs to be backed by law, needs to be proportionate, necessary. So it's not that you can use whatever data you have for whatever purpose. So, for example, there's a discussion where perhaps a database of biometric data could be used for missing children, or for terroristic, for terroristic suspects. So precise and clear purposes.
Well, I want to thank you all, because we're really at the top of the hour. This was so interesting. I really appreciate all your comments, and I hope our audience has too. And well, I hope to see you in person at some point when possible.
The next PCB,
next PCB conference in Canada or something.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, maybe in Canada.
True.
I'll be there.
Okay. Thanks,
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
Thank you.
Bye.